Good day. Today is December 17th, 2022. This title of this video is going to be, What If This Is the Way It Is? I'm doing this video because a commenter on one of Cliff High's website or communication system, we got into a little bit of a discussion in the comments, and this is in response to that, to try to develop something more, because he had some pretty good ideas and discussions with some other people on some of the other audios that Cliff High has put out, and this is an extension of Cliff High's work, or an overlay or a parallel. And please, I'm not infringing on any copyrights, and don't want to be like a Corey Good, because hopefully Cliff and I are working in the same directions, and I agree with everything he says. It's just sometimes that two different people can talk about something and it gives two different perspectives, so it's better understood by more people. This is in regards to his development of what he calls the space aliens scenarios. He's got P1, P2, P3, and he's probably working on P4 today or about this time, so I'm going to call this P5 or P6 or P7 a different scenario, or a different projection of the way it is, or the way it might be, from my experience of 45 years in this field of trying to get to the truth of the matters. And I got started on this way back when JFK was assassinated. My parents were Republicans, so he wasn't necessarily their president, but I looked up to him like a lot of the youth and a lot of the people did. And so when he was assassinated, it was a traumatic experience, and I realized even then, back there as a teenager in first year of high school, that something didn't smell right about the whole pristine bullet single assassin story that was being put out by the media. And I realized that our future had been put on a different timeline because of this. And since it was officially recognized only that it was a lone gunman and that just some crazy guy, and nothing could be done about it, instead of going after the people who perpetrated it, and their descendants are continuing what we have today. So we're still on the timeline that those powers that be, that basically was a coup of not only our country but the entire world's timeline. And as I've said before, there's only one past history, although Dr. Fauci would say something different on that, but there is only one true past history. But there are many possibilities of a future timeline, although due to certain circumstances that are allowed to exist, you start narrowing those possibilities. And that's what I want to talk about in this this video and the different scenarios, that if you know the past, you can govern yourself or the movement of the people or even corporations in fewer versions of future timelines. And if you get it too wrong, you're going to get governed less and less to the one timeline, such as the return of or our forefathers, or a return or future connection. It's not really return because it's maybe the first time of a future timeline that it was allowed to get off track or degenerate, and that's the case of the Greys or even some of the others. By the way, I don't really fully think that there is a Grey. A lot of so-called Greys, Whitley Strieber type with almond-shaped eyes and the big heads and the short legs and the long arms, are necessarily true. However, there was or is something close to that, more in line with a 3 to 4 foot degenerated species that almost appear more childlike than the so-called Greys, and that's what may very well have been shot down or brought down in 1947 outside of Roswell, although there was possibly two different crashes up by Corona, which is north of Roswell. So what does this have to do with banking, energy, JFK assassination, and some of you may think that there's no difference, but it's all connected. It's all part of the bigger picture. And unless you look at that bigger picture, you're not going to understand things. I've never called the space aliens that because it's a totally wrong term to call them. I call them interdimensional travelers, interdimensional time travelers, although time in most people's minds is a misunderstanding. When you look out at the night sky or in the daytime, out there, whatever out there is, in space, you're looking in a sense into a time machine. What you're seeing in the stars, those stars don't exist today like what you're seeing them. And you try to understand it that way. So that's why you can't really travel in space. And that's why people don't understand how other entities are getting here. And it's not because they're traveling in space. So they're not space whatever aliens. And they're not even aliens. They're dimensional travelers. You could look at it that they're coming through a portal. The largest, most continuous portal is in in Antarctica, because the Earth is more like a blueberry, and that fringe on the bottom of the blueberry, where the flower was, is Antarctica. Now there can be other portals that come and go, such as at the North Pole, the Bermuda Triangle and a lot of other triangles throughout the world, or throughout the earth. There's a small one up in Lake Superior around that area, and they can be created too in different locations. There's another one in Peru, and Tibet, and such as that. Anyway, so moving on, I'm going to. It was in my 45-minute video that got corrupted. I was talking about this, and I really need to get into it because sorry about the quality. I don't have the equipment that Cliff has, but this is a chart of civilization, and I found out that this I drew up for the railway system, to explain, and believe it or not, that's important because it fits in as a transportation, because in order to have civilization, first you have two different parties, two different families, two different groups of people, and they become specialists in maybe one thing, wheat, and another family or group of people finds a pool of tar, such as what was a long time ago in Los Angeles area, and they develop a method to refine that into an oil, and they burn this oil, and they find out they get energy from this oil. So you have this group that produces gallons and barrels of oil, and they trade with this group. And that is really where civilization comes about. It's the trade. It's that third-party trading. And that's what the East India Trading Company monopolized, and even today, under the City of London Incorporated, they control trade through their grid system. So this chart plugs into many different things. It can chart in, you can plug in the interdimensional time travelers in here. You can plug in the development of this fork in here. You can plug a lot of different subject matters in here, and it'll be all quite similar. So let's talk about the railway. You have a claim. Well, first of all, you have a land grant from the Spanish Empire, and which was taken over by the British Empire, and the king and queen had a claim on the North American continent, even though it was occupied by natives. But they had a claim, and they forced that claim upon the natives, and they gave a land grant to the people or to the administrators of that claim, and they developed a charter. Now, I'm going to read a charter again because that's very important. A charter is an instrument emanating from the sovereign power. Now, the American Civil Revolutionary War was a war for the people to gain sovereignty. See, so each person or each man or woman who continued along that line was a sovereign. However, with the War of 1812, which the British Empire won, and especially after the American Civil War, which the British Empire backed both sides, and created that just to gain even more power through a corporation, through the development of corporations. So we are really under a corporatocracy today, not under a republic or a democracy or even an oligarchy. We are under a corporatocracy via the implementation of persons swearing, pledging to the one world corporation. They're pledging their body, soul, their children, their property to the banking system, the present banking system, the present debt banking system that is their God, their beast. That's what a pledge is. More of a charter, a city organic charter, a charter of municipal corporation. See, that's what the corporate side, whereas a charter differs from a constitution, and in that the former is granted by the sovereign, while the latter is established by the people themselves. Now that sovereign can either be the king and queen or the CEO of a corporation, or individual sovereigns that have recorded and have lived as a sovereign would, such as myself, such as a lot of patriots throughout this land. I'll start that over again. An instrument emanating from a sovereign power in the nature of a grant either to the whole nation or to a class or portion of the people, to a corporation or to a colony or dependency, assuring to them certain rights, liberties, and powers, such as the Great Charter or Magna Charta. As such were the charters granted to certain English colonies in America. So the charter is quickly kind of a contract. It's a explaining the different abilities that group of people are going to be focusing on and trying to develop. So, getting back to the railroad, you had a route, a right-of-way that was put out under a charter that was originated as a claim. So originally that right-of-way was for the people. Now, especially after the Civil War, because we were under a military dictatorship, they confiscated all those privately run railroads, those right-of-ways, which were more public at that time, and they confiscated that and sold those railroads off to powerful families, and that was basically done by controlling the auctions. It's basically fraud, so that only certain families could get in there and buy. And believe it or not, the entire railway system was basically purchased for, I think, 420 gold dollars, because this one railroad had the charters for the greater right-of-ways, which was extended miles beyond where the track was laid. In some areas of the country, it was as far as you could see was the right-of-way. And you see, that's along that right-of-way is where the electric lines, the telegraph lines, gas lines, and all that was chartered or was extended off, amended off those original charters. And there was actually one railway in South Carolina that extended into North Carolina that had the original charters. So in a sense, this family that bought that particular railway, all the other railways were basically sidelines, branches of that one railway that had the strongest charter for that right-of-way system. So you see, that family acquired through different methods turned that public right-of-way into their private railroad. Now that would be hours and hours to explain that. And there was actually a Pujol committee back in, I think it was 1909, that studied this for over a year. They had 100 people working on this, trying to figure out who and what happened to those charters and the right-of-ways and who owned what. And they were trying to figure out the mess, and finally they gave up. There's hundreds of pages that you can read on that explains all that. But anyway, through those railroads, the banking system developed through those same families, such as the Rockefellers, but they were ultimately more owned by Rothschild-type families back in Europe. So these banks had bonds, the highest, most powerful, most valuable bonds 150 years ago, or 100 years ago, that period of time, was the railroad bonds, because they were the main form of transportation of goods. So the bonds were based on those security, those what was traded on Wall Street as a portion of that railroad, so that the people could buy these bonds, but ultimately it was still controlled by the Rothschild family through Rockefellers and other families. Especially when the dollar was not backed by gold anymore, it became an IOU. And that's what you have, the 10-year notes that they're sold every couple months under the Fed. You have 10-year notes, 2-year notes, 1-year notes, these are different bonds. Notes, bonds, this is kind of the same thing, just like the Federal Reserve note is a note, an IOU, but it's basically a security note, a secured supposedly note through these bonds. But the less the bonds are so valued, the longer it goes for that IOU. And actually today, or these recent months, the 10-year note, 10-year bond is worth less than inflation. So you can't have that. That's basically a bankruptcy, and you can fake the bankruptcies all you want, but it's basically a lie and a fraud. So when you have enough of these bonds, whatever they are, enough of these secured guarantees, you can put it under a trust. It's a natural progression, a trust. Now that can be a lawful trust, a legal trust, or just trusting somebody, as in I trust you, or I trust the government, or I trust Dr. Fauci, or I trust the committee that investigated the assassination of JFK, the committees that investigated 9/11, the trust you have in that. Let me go back here to this 4 or 3. You have a sovereign, you have a corporation, which is a pledging to the beast, pledging to the god. or you can have a self-government through sovereigns, through people who are responsible. Now, a corporation passes the responsibility. They pass the buck. And people who pledge to that corporation think that they're getting something guaranteed. They think that they're getting benefits and entitlements. So they don't want to be self-responsible. So they contract with a corporation acting as a government, acting as a service provider, for benefits and entitlements because they're too lazy or they want to be a parasite on sovereigns. They want to be a parasite on people who produce something, people who can do. Where the deep state, the people who pledge to the beast, to the god, are indebted to that corporation, to that bank, to that debt system banks. Now, all banks are bad, but a debt-based bank is. A debt-based system will lead to a collapse of civilization. Now, I have down here what all this is. It measures out. It's of this, or of the civilization. And you have banking, you have records, you have numbers, not figures, but numbers, you have law and order, and you have accounting. You have an accountant, or as in counting, or as in reckoning. So these measures are cyclic. These measures are the world. They are reality. They are truth. This is the way it is. So let's get back to the interdimensional travelers. You plug that in, and I'm claiming that they are interdimensional rather than space aliens. So a contract and a charter in that sense would be just an agreement between different peoples that maybe this claim that I'm projecting on you is more real, a more real way, or P5 way of understanding civilization, understanding the world, understanding reality, understanding the truth. This is the way it is. Now, I'm just putting this out under P5 or P6 or P7. And the right of way in that sense would be their coming or their being. And then the bond would be a bonding of their understanding, or trying to teach the people on planet Earth their history. Because if you understand the true history, you understand the now. And that is through a trust. Now, people like to poo-pah certain dimensional beings as evil or as good. And no doubt there is some truth to that. And that's where a great confusion comes about. Most of the contactees that some people have are just contacts with spirits. And they are never in the now, never in this dimension, the 3.5 dimensions that we have here. Incidentally, a corporation is 2 dimensions. It's a contract, basically like a paper-like contract, so it's only a 2-dimensional two-dimensional world. So that's why it's inferior to physical reality, to physical truth. So getting back to most of these contacts are like ghosts, but people put so much trust in them that they can get off track, because entities in a higher dimension can be good entities or bad entities, basically liars or not. You have no way of knowing whether they're lying to you or telling you half-truths or not. But 90% of contacts are demonic in a sense, for lack of other words. The only way you can gain more purity is live a clean life and try to communicate with the universe as a whole rather than individual entities. That's what is misunderstood in the Bible. That's basically what Yahshua was trying to teach 2,000 years ago about, well, I'm not going to get into that. It's too deep, too long here. We're already into 31 minutes. So what I deal with is physical, and that's what I'm going to concentrate on for the rest of this lecture, is the interdimensional travelers who appear in the physical. Now, good place to start would be in the 1920s and through the 1930s in Germany. They first developed a non-physical contact, the MUREL Society, the original MUREL Society, and eventually a physical communication dimension was established. And getting back, remember I said transportation and energy are two important things. And so what was developed in Germany beginning in the late 20s and throughout the 30s was new forms of energy, and that was basically the UFO, the saucer-shaped ones. Now, in some of my other videos, I talk about the one that had a propeller system at the top, so this acted as a torpedo would in the ocean. You can have that propeller back here, but what's going on, believe it or not, scientifically is different than an airplane with wings on it. This is actually a much more efficient system, the torpedo. Now you can have a torpedo in the air, basically a blimp. Now the powered blimps that the Hindenburg and most of the blimps that were developed had engines on the bottom of them and that powered them forward. It would have been much more efficient to have a propeller, and it wouldn't even had to have been that big. It would have been bigger than the propellers on these individual engines, but at the front like a torpedo or at the back, and that would have been a much more efficient way to travel because you're using the Coanda effect rather than the wing effect, although the wing effect is really part Coanda, but that's too deep to get into. I've gotten into some of my other videos. So then later in the 1930s, you had what I call the second generation UFO, and that worked off ions. That was an ion powered one. And you have ion lifters today, and you actually have that first generation one. I had videos of that in some of my earlier videos in the comments section, and that was all, somehow somebody took all the comments out, so those links don't exist anymore. But what I call the third generation is a true gravity, and it works by totally separating this independent sovereign object from the earth itself. And that's when you actually cut or create the method where this becomes independent, not grounded to the earth. You can have like a mini earth, and you can set this up so that it reacts to the earth itself, so it moves about by that controlled reaction to the earth. So this appears to project in different directions by how it interacts with the earth itself. So when I say grounding, now most people think that once you put styrofoam or something that doesn't conduct electricity to the earth, once you're above the earth, you're no longer grounded. But that's not true. You're still under the same negative and positive as the earth. You just separated it, but you're still, in a sense, grounded to the earth by the negative and positive forces in that object. So the trick is through vibrations, through the right harmonics, you become independent. You break that ground. That's the secret. So that was learned, and it was these segment of the Germans, and it wasn't really the Nazis, because the German army and the Nazis by the end of World War II had become bitter enemies, and they were fighting each other. So just like in China today, you have the Communist Party, the CCP, and you have the older forefather families of the people of China. You have them, just like you would in this country. You have the sovereigns, the true patriots, versus the supporters of the corporation who are pledged to the banks. And the CCP and the debt creation banking system are arm in arm, just like the Bolsheviks were under the Soviets. The indebting banking system, the central banks are arm in arm with the communist regimes, because they can control, the banks can control the people much better under a communist system. So that's 40 minutes. It's getting close. So, I was part of a group. I joined them back in the mid-1970s and was with them right up until the end of 1996. And I was out here in February, in Arizona area, in February of 1997, and I got into an altercation with local police department up in Superior, Arizona, up the road from here, and they ticketed me, and I went to the courthouse there in Superior, and the judge listened to my presentation, listened to my statement of my identity, my standing, and he dismissed the case of driving without a license and no tags and all that stuff, no insurance and stuff like that. And what does that have to do with the Phoenix Lights? A lot happened that month, or the next 30 days. The same thing is happening now. For those people that are following me, on December 8th, I was finally pulled over by a brave municipal cop of the municipal city of APACHE Junction Corporation for having this on the back of my car, Regulation Z exempt. Now, he declined to look at any of my paperwork, but he did look at my assembly ID card, which I presented to him, which stated and was verifiable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that I was a recorded sovereign. So anyway, he gave me this on 4 counts. No registration within the vehicle, no proof of insurance, failure to display license plate, no driver's license. Now, Thursday, the 15th, I took down this affidavit, this 5-page affidavit with 7 pages of evidence. It's a declaration of status and standing and motion to dismiss. Now, that court date is January 3rd, 2022, which makes it impossible. Yeah, right there. This complainant put down 2022. I don't know if you can see that, instead of 2023. So right there, that's a default right there. So anyway, we'll see what happens, whether the prosecutor, now that this is actually on the court, on the clerk of court, which is actually more important than the judge, because that is the recording. The records of all this is more important. So anyway, what does this have to do with interdimensional travel? Through the corporation causing a lot of the more influential people on Earth to degenerate more like the gray, you're having a vacuum, in a sense, created on planet Earth, and it's causing a sucking sound throughout the universe. And some of you understand what I'm talking about. because the corporation is a beast. It doesn't follow universal law. So you have a degenerating process when the people are following and pledging to a corporation. So the sovereigns, the true sovereigns who are self-responsible and have recorded as such, are more like the followers of Yahshua HaMashiach 2,000 years ago. They are following universal law, which the 10 Bill of Rights of the original Constitution in the 48 or 50 states of the Union the 10 Bill of Rights are based on sort of the 10 Commandments, which are based on universal law, sort of. I mean, there's some mistranslations in there, but the 14th Amendment was the bringing about of the corporate citizen. So that wasn't so important immediately after the Civil War when it was passed, because 14th Amendment citizens really didn't get into great numbers until 1934, after the bankruptcy of this nation in 1933, after the 1929 Depression. And that's what we're cyclically happening right presently. You have Nancy Pelosi that says, we must have government, we need government, meaning you need government so that Pelosi can be rich and get more powerful, because we're greedy and we're never satisfied. We always want more power. And that's true of the whole deep state, the whole parasites that are sucking the earth down a black hole, in a sense. So that's what it has to do with interdimensional travel, because the earth is quarantined because it's so far degenerated that until we get our act together, which we were supposed to do with the first so-called meeting with Eisenhower back in 1952 or somewhere around about there, which he rejected because you can't tell us what to do. We're a corporatocracy. We have all these pledges of all these munchkins pledging their souls, their bodies, their property, their children's to us. So we are gods. That's it in a nutshell. So until enough people get out there and make their records as self-governing, self-responsible, known, this earth is going to be continued quarantined. This technology can't come out because too many of you are pledging to the corporatocracy, to the indebting, the banksters that are indebting you through their negative debt system. So we shall see whether they dismiss this or not. I'll try to let you know in a future video. I know a lot of you are going to question what I put this out, P5 scenario, but you're welcome to it. review this, review some of my other videos. Incidentally, the older ones seem to phase in and out as far as their downloading on the BitChute channel. Those that I have posted, and some of them are even older, on the YouTube channel, they still play. But don't let the number fool you, because just because somebody pays a lot of attention to somebody, such as Carl Tuckerson or Dr. Fauci or Pelosi or Biden or Putin or Xi or whatever, whoever, doesn't necessarily mean that they're absolutely right. I'm not absolutely right, but if you get a handle on this P5 scenario, it'll all make more sense by seeing that basically you have the patriots, the followers of Yahshua, the followers of universal law, who are the peaceful ones, the warring factors, the admiralty, municipal, merchant, commerce, corporation, based on two-dimensional contracts, is warring because they are using the war flag, the flag with the stripes this way instead of this way. That's a war flag. Even without the fringe, it's based on the similarities to the flag from the East India Trading Company, which enforced on the world their grid system, their grid of following the railroads, the right-of-ways. Yeah, you're either getting this or you're not. It's 42 minutes, so I think I've covered the biggest points. Just because a lot of people are talking about the military coming to the rescue, you shouldn't be putting off doing things thinking, oh, somebody's going to come and save me, white hats or whatever, or Trump, or Juan 07, most of that is based on a little, 10, 20%, kind of like Corey Good is based on. Now, no offense, Corey, I listened to a couple of your videos way back, and I couldn't even get through them then, and more recently I listened to the one where you're out talking about the lawsuit that you and David Wilcox are involved in, but I couldn't even listen to more than 5 minutes of that. Your ego was just so, but no offense, you may have done a video where you were 100% on, but I missed that. But anyway, the more mouthy, the faster talker, the more slick somebody is, doesn't necessarily mean that they're right. And if you understand how some of us are compromised in our ability to get the word out, censored, there's soft censorship. That's what basically Elon Musk is involved with Twitter, is in censorship. That's what Michael Hastings was trying to bring out when he was assassinated, when they took control of his rental new Mercedes and ran it in to a tree, a palm tree, and the engine blew out. I mean, it exploded so bad that the engine actually blew out many, many feet behind, which showed that somebody not only took control of the car, but they had explosives in that car. But he was working on exposing these congressional legislation that had been passed that made all news and school items totally propaganda, so that they weren't speaking the truth. It was all propaganda. Of course, it had been part propaganda before that. I found this out in the 1980s when I kept going back to the same newspaper in San Antonio, Texas, and kept bugging he was either a UPI reporter or a United Press International, UPI. They merged eventually, but he got mad one day at me and said, "Listen, nothing can be published unless we say so." Now, I thought he was talking about UFOs and energy and cheaper forms of energy that me and other people were working on to get out to the public. They were keeping all that totally censored. Or if a little bit leaked out, they would badmouth it so much that that people would laugh. "Oh, ha ha ha, you don't believe in UFOs, ha ha ha," and stuff like that. Yeah, Texas was a hotbed at that time. Anyway, I didn't realize he wasn't just talking about UFOs, he was talking about everything. And we learned through Julian Assange and Snowden that the CIA was basically had those UPI reporters that were free to the newspapers, and the AP reporters were basically working with the CIA. They were subcontractors. So that's how today the media is totally controlled, being exposed by Elon Musk. Not that he's a total good guy either. So there, that's 58 minutes. I better not go hit the 60 because sometimes this recording goes. So study all this. It's truth versus the corporatocracy. If you understand it that way, the mess starts making more and more sense. So, happy trails.